Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in. I hope you're all well wherever you are and whatever you're up to. I'm Lauren, and in this video I wanted to chat to you about one of my most recent makes, which is the top that I'm wearing just now. It's the Closet Case Patterns Ebony Tee. Now, during these strange times that we are in right now, I know that loads of you guys are using your sewing skills to help you cope in whatever way you can. So it might be that you're just using sewing as a bit of a distraction to just get absorbed in something and just sort of take your mind off everything that's going on, or it might be that you're kind of doing mending and maybe sort of repairing stuff that you had around the house that you've been meaning to do for ages. I know I've ticked a few unfinished projects off my list recently, or I know that also loads of you are using your skills to help sew things for amazing health and care workers out there. So well done to you guys for doing all of that. You know, everybody's just putting in so much effort in whatever way that they can. And I know that everybody's in a different situation. Some people are able to kind of contribute to those efforts in different ways than others. At the moment, I've got Sophia and baby Solly with me full time during the week while my husband works. He's working from home right now, and I'm trying to keep the business going as well, which poses its own challenges as we sort of adjust to a new way of working. And I'm not really getting much sewing time at all, but sewing is my kind of escape. Although it is my job, I do it because I really love it as well. And I wanted to just make something that was quite quick and that was going to be easy to wear and nice and comfy, and that also had to fit my current criteria of being able to still be able to feed the baby really easily. So my sort of go-to in terms of being able to have clothes that I can still feed the baby with really easily is that I usually just layer up. So I'll wear like a vest top underneath and then something that I can easily kind of lift up, which this top is great for because, as you can see, it is really sort of loose and floaty. So I've made quite a few ebony tees before. I've always done the cropped version, but it does come with other lengths as well, and dress length. And you can also do the raglan sleeve version or the set and sleeve version, which is what this one is here. So there's quite a lot of kind of options with this pattern, which is quite good. And then it does have this really full shape, so you can see it's like quite exaggerated A-line. It's really sort of soft and swishy, and that's the same in the dress as well. So yeah, my version is the cropped version, but I did lengthen it by 5 centimeters, just following the short and lengthen lines that are on the pattern. You can't really just sort of extend the bottom on something that's got such an exaggerated A-line shape as this one, so you do have to use that shorten and lengthen line. So you know, it would be quite cropped. I'm wearing it with some high-waisted trousers, so it's fine. But yeah, if it was 5 centimeters shorter, it would literally be like right at the top of my high-waisted trousers. So yeah, just kind of bear that in mind if you're making the cropped version. So the fabric I've used to make my version is this Tencel modal, and it comes with other colorways here, which I've sort of put out on the table. So it's also this kind of greeny one here, and then like a kind of rusty sort of orangey kind of one, and then the navy blue as well. So the composition of this fabric is Tencel modal, so it's very similar to viscose in terms of its properties. So if you've ever used viscose jersey before, it's really similar to that. So it's very lightweight, it's very, very swishy and moves around a lot. The difference with the Tencel modal is just the sort of technicalities in terms of the way that the fibre is actually manufactured and made, and it's a bit more environmentally friendly compared to some viscoses. But yeah, in terms of the way it behaves, it's just the same. And I think you do really need something that's quite lightweight and swishy for this style, otherwise it might sort of feel quite kind of full at the bottom. But yeah, you can see that because it is really sort of drapey, it just moves around really nicely, and yeah, it just means that it hangs in that kind of fuller style. If you prefer plains, then we do also have a new range of plain Tencel jerseys as well. I'm not entirely sure on the stock levels right now, so depending on when you're watching this video, it may or may not be shown as in stock on the website, but we are expecting a delivery in really soon, and we'll be getting a delivery hopefully of more of these colourways too. So yeah, if you ever see anything on the website that's out of stock, you can always drop us an email and then we can let you know when it is available again. So in terms of construction, this top is pretty easy to construct. It's only got 4 pattern pieces, front, back, sleeves, and then the neckband as well. But I just wanted to chat to you about a few things that I did in the process of making it, which might kind of give you a few ideas, or sometimes it's just sort of interesting to see how other people do things. So the first thing that I wanted to show you is the cutting layout. Now I tend to personally find that I don't actually often follow the cutting layouts that come with patterns to the letter. You know, as long as things are cut out on the grain, you can sort of sway from the cutting layout that's suggested in the pattern. It might depend on what size you're making, on the exact width of your fabric, because sometimes fabrics are a little bit narrower or a little bit wider than what's like specifically recommended on the pattern, so you may be able to sort of move things around and squeeze them out. So what I've done is I had to do it on the floor, had to kind of scramble around on the floor to get my camera angle showing my whole bit of fabric. But I'm going to show you a few options that you would maybe consider when you're laying your pattern pieces on, just to try and optimize the fabric that you've got. So if you are using fabric that you've got already at home, and you've maybe not got as much as what you thought you needed, then just play around with the cutting layout a little bit, because sometimes you can just sort of compromise slightly and just kind of squeeze things on a little bit. So the view that you can see now is a typical cutting layout where the fabric is folded with the selvages together, and then the fold in the fabric is then opposite that. And you can see that the front and back bodices are placed along the fold, but in terms of the length of my bit of fabric, it is pretty tight to sort of fit them in there. So one option is to try and get the bodice pieces side by side, but due to this really exaggerated A-line shape, you can't get the top and bottom of the pattern like next to each other. You have to switch the orientation round and have them facing opposite ways. Now this is fine because this print is non-directional, it doesn't have a top and bottom to it. But if you did do it this way, then it would obviously mean that you would have to have a seam going up the centre back, so you need to add on a bit extra seam allowance and then to have a seam up the back, which is not ideal really. So the alternative is that you can create your own fold. So you make your own fold in the fabric, and you want to make it as wide as the widest point of the pattern. So the other thing I want to just mention again is that when in this little video that I'm showing you, I did have to scramble around on the floor to get the camera angle right. But when I'm doing this on the actual cutting table at proper height, I would always fold the entire length of the fabric and make it sort of flat rather than having this big bunched up bit at the other end. You may also see Sophia's toes popping in at some points, always beside me. So then you need to make the fold in the opposite side of the fabric again and have the pattern piece facing in the opposite direction. Now you can see that if the orientation was that the top of the pattern pieces were at the same, you're just not going to fit them side by side. So again, you have to flip that direction, and then you need to use the fabric that is underneath the fold on the other side. So the folds that you're then making in the fabric do kind of overlap each other, but because of the shape of the bodice pieces, you can still get them side by side on the pattern. So you just have to kind of fold back that fabric a little bit, check that the bottom widest point of the pattern is still okay, and then you can kind of overlap them that way. So that's just an idea of an alternative way that you might want to cut out your pattern pieces, and that would apply to any fabric that you were using, whether it was stretch or non-stretch. And also it obviously depends on whether your fabric is plain or got a directional print or not. If your print is, when I say directional print, I mean that it's got a clear top and a bottom to it, whether it would look upside down if you switched your pattern pieces round. The other thing that I would recommend doing when you create your own fold in the fabric on jersey fabric is once you've made the fold and you've sort of smoothed it out and made sure everything sort of looks nice and flat and even, is that you can look along the edge of where the fold actually is, and you want to look really closely to sort of see like the grain of the fabric or the definition of the stitches, and you'll see very, very fine faint lines that make up the fabric as it's been knitted together. You want to make sure that they generally look like they're running parallel to the fold. The other thing that you can look for is a repeat in the pattern as well. So if your fabric does have a pattern on it, you might think that it doesn't have any sort of regularity to it, but it probably does. So on this one here, you can see that the same sort of type of splodge happens every so often along the fold. So when you're then creating your fold to get ready to cut your fabric out, you can just make sure that same sort of splodge in the fabric is at the same point in relation to the fold, and that way you're going to know that your fabric is more likely to be cut out straight as well, and it's not going to sort of squee whiff a little bit as you then construct it and then you're wearing the garment. So when I come to put the neckband into my jersey garments, I generally use the open method, where you only sew one shoulder seam and then you just have the neckband as like one long strip and you stretch it as you're sewing it in. So it's a bit more of a kind of freestyling way to put it in, but I just find that it's a bit quicker now that I've had a few practices of it. I do have a really popular video that's about putting in jersey neckbands, and I'll link to that in the description to this video as well. So if you do want some extra hints and tips on putting jersey neckbands in, then you can check that out, because it's really detailed. I don't want to sort of recreate the wheel by showing you again here, because it is really sort of concise and clear in that other video. But the other thing that I wanted to show you, which is kind of like a time-saving thing, I guess, and just makes whipping up a jersey top even quicker, is sewing in the sleeve without putting any pins in. So it's quite common on jersey garments that you set the sleeve in flat, so you don't sew the side seams. You just sew your shoulder seams, and then your sleeve pattern piece is totally flat, and then you put the sleeve in flat, and then you sew the seam of the sleeve and the side seam kind of all in one afterwards. So this pattern is really good because it's got lots of notches to help you sort of make sure everything's lined up in the sleeve. So it's got a double notch at the back, a single notch at the front, and then a notch for your shoulder seam as well to help match that up. So I just put it into the overlocker, and I'll match up the start of the like at the underarm bit, and just sew a little bit, just so that I know that they are kind of anchored underneath the foot of the machine, and that I can then sort of pull on them without it sort of pulling the whole fabric out of the machine. And then you just want to hold your notches together, so you're kind of doing it in stages, but make your notches match up, and then within that little section between the notches and where the foot of the overlocker is, or the sewing machine, if you're doing it on the sewing machine you could do it on there too, you just have to make sure that the raw edges sit together as you sew it. So it might be that you have to put a little bit of tension on the fabric. You're not looking at sort of pulling and stretching it a lot, it still should be generally quite relaxed, but you might have to put a bit of tension on it just to shimmy the raw edges together, and just work in those small sections. So once you get to the first notch, then just match up that center notch with the shoulder seam, check that your seam allowances are sort of sitting in the right direction at the shoulder seam, and then sew that next little bit, just making sure that your raw edges are together all the time, and just kind of follow that through along the whole length of your sleeve. And then once you've done, you can just kind of check that everything's looking good from the front side. So it's just a kind of quicker way, I guess, to save lots of pinning, especially when you're doing it on the overlocker, because it's quite awkward when you pin and you're doing stuff in the overlocker, because if you accidentally leave one of those pins in, it is not good on the overlocker, because the whole thing's just going to get kind of eaten up a little bit. So yeah, if you're feeling brave, then you can give it a try. Obviously it requires a bit more practice and kind of coordination to get everything lined up, but yeah, it's just something that I usually do when I'm kind of short on time and trying to just whip something up. The other thing that I wanted to mention in terms of like stitches and machines, I usually use a combination of my overlocker and my sewing machine when I'm sewing a jersey garment. So if it's just like a simple straight seam like the shoulder seam or something, or the side seams, the sleeve seams, I'll just do it straight on the overlocker, or the, you know, setting in the sleeve as well. As you saw, I just used the overlocker. But there are other times that I use my sewing machine as well. So when before I put the neckband in, I usually baste the raw edges of my neckband with a larger, wider zigzag stitch, because it just makes it easier to control a little bit. So I use the sewing machine for that. And then I also really like using the stretch stitch on my sewing machine, which is the kind of lightning bolt one, and I usually lengthen it to 3.5. I find the sort of default setting of 2.5 millimeters quite short, so I usually always lengthen it to 3.5. So when I come to put the neckband in, I usually always just insert the neckband on the sewing machine with a stretch stitch, and then I'll overlock it afterwards. But obviously if you don't have an overlocker, you can just leave it, it's fine, it doesn't matter. So yeah, I use both machines then. And then for the hem and for the top stitching round the neck as well, so I put a line of stitching just to hold the seam allowances of the neckband a bit flatter. I just used my stretch stitch for that as well, and then I used it on here and at the bottom. I personally tend to find that in terms of twin needling on much lighter fabrics like this one, it is really common to get quite a bit of tunneling in it, and I think that's just to do with the tension of the thread on a much lighter weight of fabric. I usually find that twin needling works better on heavier fabrics like loop backs or sort of sweatshirting fabrics, but it might be different on your machine. So yeah, I usually just use that kind of stretch lightning bolt stitch, and it just it looks more or less like a straight stitch anyway, but obviously it stretches, which is what you need for jersey. So I hope you found those little tips of my experience of making the top useful. I'll link to the blog post in the description of this video, and in there you'll find links to the fabrics that I've mentioned and the pattern as well. If we're out of stock of the pattern, then you can get the PDF from the Closet Case Patterns website. We're just not able to get any more physical stock in of the patterns at the moment because of the restrictions and people not operating as normal. But thanks so much for watching, guys. If you haven't subscribed to my channel already, then just remember to hit subscribe so you don't miss out on my next video. The plan is that next week I will be doing a new fabrics video. Everything's kind of a bit out of sync at the moment just because of everything that's going on. So normally I do a new fabrics video at the end of every month, but I've kind of had to shift that to the start of May, because if you're a Sewing Society fan, I'm really sorry we don't have a kit for May because we just couldn't get everything together in time given everything that's going on. So I've got a new fabrics video for you as well, and then we do have a Sewing Society for June that is going to be happening. So yeah, you can watch out for that video next week. So yeah, I'll see you soon. Bye.